So my remarks today are about passion and engagement in personal life, in public service, and in public affairs. Let me start with a personal story. Flagstaff and northern Arizona have always been sort of like Camelot to my family. My mom and 5 of her girlfriends came out to summer school in Flagstaff from South Central Oklahoma in 1941 for coursework in education. At then it was called Arizona State College. Soon after, my dad came out to court her. He was concerned that she might get up a case with another man from our hometown in Oklahoma who had moved to Flagstaff. By all accounts, my mom was a pretty hot number, as they used to say back then. She was passionate about life, but so was my father. More about that in a minute. After I got the faculty position here at NAU, my mom came out to visit every summer. While walking around North Quad one day, she pointed to her room in Morton Hall and told me how Dad used to sneak her out at night to canoodle. Look it up on Google. And how he wound up proposing to her on the Hart Prairie Road just north of town here. After their marriage in '41, Pearl Harbor happened. And my parents, both of whom were pilots, decided to enlist. He in the Army Air Corps and she in the Women Air Service Pilots program. During the war, my mom taught pilots how to fly, towed targets, for practice, and ferried crippled aircraft back and forth cross country so they could be repaired. After the war, they had my brothers and me. By the way, when I told my mom that I was applying for a job in forestry here at NAU, she said, "Go for it. If you get it, never leave." I've followed her advice. Okay, the next thing about happiness that I want to talk about, so that was about passion in personal life. But the next thing I want to talk about is whether or not there's a secret to being happy and successful. And I guess I'd have to say, no, there isn't. But there really are some fundamental principles, mostly revolving around being of service to others, to the nation, and in fact, to the world. It doesn't matter how a life is lived if you don't benefit others. Now let's go on and talk about being a public servant for just a minute or so, and how that road can lead to happiness and success. Being a forester, I'll take a forester's point of view. Gifford Pinchot is known as the father of forestry because he gave so much over his entire life to the establishment of the profession of forestry in the United States. In 1891, Pinchot worked with President Teddy Roosevelt to establish the nation's forest reserves, which eventually became our national forest. He also worked to develop establishing the nation's first forestry graduate program at Yale University in 1900. Of course, that's where I went to get my degree. You may notice in the program there. Much of his conservation philosophy shapes our own School of Forestry here at NAU today. But I think there are some general principles we can gain from Pinchot's look at what it is to be a forester. Let's start with a quote from Pinchot from his 1914 publication, The Training of a Forester. "You may describe a forester from the standpoint of his specialized education and his application of technical knowledge to the protection and the management of forests. But you cannot stop there. There's another concept that is equally important. Every forester is a public servant, no matter by whom employed." He went on to state, that by virtue of their profession and education, foresters are always and everywhere public servants. Pinchot repeatedly declared that a professional forester owed loyalty to current and future generations at timescales not of years, but of hundreds of years. I suggest that this concept of public service is true of every discipline and profession represented here today. It does not matter what your degree is in, nor does it matter for whom you work. NAU has prepared each of you to be a public servant, whether in the private sector or in the public sector. Your role now as graduates is to integrate and apply knowledge, but also to continue to discover knowledge. The knowledge that you have today will be obsolete within years, if not months. So learning has to continue to be a lifelong endeavor for you. And I would urge each of you to be everywhere and always a public servant in your job, in your volunteerism, in raising families, and all that you endeavor to do. As I look out across this audience, I see each of you as our hope for a better future, for society, for the land, and for the sustainability of our planet, no matter where your individual disciplines may lead you. Thank you very much.